Okay, so what is the purpose of music? It's something that kind of hit into my mind because I was watching the conversation between DJ Academics and XXX Tentacion. It was a conversation, obviously, that they had before X had died, but it was probably maybe a couple of months or so before he died. 'Cause I think it was before he put out his album Question Mark. I think it's called Question, whatever it's called. But it was like the 3 hour conversation that they had. It was like 3 hours and 6 minutes or something like that. They were talking for a long time, and it was like it was either like FaceTime or but they were live streaming the talk when they were having it. But basically, in the talk, there's a part in there where X asks DJ Academics that question, like he's asking him what is the purpose of music, right? And he was basically explaining how he had plans to basically try and use music to tap into different frequencies with people, like to help people get into more meditative states, to help people, really consider and think differently, right? And he was explaining how from the time he was like 15 years old, he was working on like because I guess he was like used to do a little bit of engineering and he was working on frequencies and stuff like that and playing around with like EQs, right? And for those who don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but because I know about it since I've been making beats since around 2009. It's almost around 20 years now. I've been making beats, and I started writing music around like 2001, 2002 when I was around 6 years old. But for those who don't know, a EQ is basically what's used to cut out or bring up certain sounds, right? Like for instance, as I'm talking through this microphone, if I get closer to the mic, you could probably hear more bass, right? But now as I'm farther away, it's different. A EQ is basically used to cut out certain things. So for instance, a lot of people are familiar with the 808 sound, like the 808 bass, right? The 808 bass is that boom, boom, right? And that's on the low end of like frequency, right? So basically, what EQ allows you to do is to play around with that frequency, right? So you can use a EQ to take the boom boom and make it sound like boom boom, right? Like you could switch it up, right, and do certain things to edit it and make it hit your ears differently, right? So, and he was basically explaining that, and something it also made me think of when he was saying that, and also why I want to talk about this. There's a part in the Bible where, for a lot of people are familiar with the story of David and Goliath, but basically it has to do with David before he became the king of the Israelites, and the king of the Israelites at the time when David was younger, like at around the time when he defeated Goliath, was a guy named Saul, right? And so basically there was a time where Saul, I'm trying to remember how exactly it was phrased. I'm paraphrasing here, but basically the Bible explains that Saul had like an evil spirit on him, and David came and he played a lyre, which is kind of like it's kind of like a harp, or like or it's a stringed instrument, right? So, but basically, when David came and played that instrument, David played it so well that he lifted that evil spirit off of Saul within that moment, right? And it was something that was very interesting that, like, no matter what you think about the Bible, whether you think it's fact, whether you think it's completely fake, it's interesting to me that I think anybody should find this interesting as well, that something that was written eons ago, because the Old Testament was written and completed before Jesus was even born, right? That all the way from back then, music was being used to lift off certain spirits or lift off certain mental, I guess you could say, feelings or emotions off of people, right? So, and that's kind of what triggered in my mind in regards to like what is the purpose of music, right? And how it could be utilized and used. Because if you think about it, the same way how David used music to lift a spirit off of Saul, right? Somebody with a wicked soul could have used music to expand or encourage that wicked spirit inside of Saul, right? And I think there's a similar thing going on with music nowadays, right? Well, not just nowadays, it kind of has always been that way. It's just, I mean, in regards to, music being used to put bad spirits or encourage bad spirits within people, right? right? Like it, and music, just like any art form, is a form of expression that comes from the inner, right? Even music from the ancient world, right, was put together by somebody. Somebody thought of and wrote the music, and then maybe like the king's court, and the musicians in the king's court would play the music that the composer came up with, right? Or even seeing the times of like Shakespeare, where they would write their compositions and they would go around all across Europe and play their music in all these kind of music halls and stuff like that, right? But basically, what I'm getting at is from the beginning of time, music has been in existence and been used to entertain and used to, I guess you could say, move and shift people's moods, right? Their moods, and it has a particular frequency to it when it's doing different things, right? Right, and music as humans do it, like it's unique to us. It's one of those things that kind of show the God in us, that kind of shows the difference between us and the other animals on the earth and the higher mind that we have compared to them, right? There's animals that are musical, I guess you could say, like dolphins and hummingbirds, right? But they don't, like, as at least as far as we know, they don't come up with songs, and they don't like craft music in the way that we do, right? Where like it unfolds in a certain way, where it does, or it has a certain tone to it, certain tunes to it, certain vibes to it, right? And music is essential to every human. Every culture has their own form of music, right? Japanese music has a sound. Jamaican music has a sound. Haitian music has a sound, right? Chinese music has a sound. Bulgarian music has a sound. British music has, like, whatever a country or culture you could name, the music has a sound to it, right? Even within modern times, when we think of time periods like, say, like ancient Egypt or the medieval times, if you're familiar enough with media that has displayed or used those time periods as a backdrop, there's even a musical tone or a type of music that we associate with ancient Egypt, or the types of music that we associate with medieval times, right? But let me not get too far away from the point of, of asking the question, what is the purpose of music, right? I think if we look at music, how we use it now, it can kind of answer that question in regards to what the purpose is, right? And even though the formats change, because maybe some people don't know, I hope people know, but there was a time when we didn't have recorded music, right? Recorded music is actually very, very new to the human experience, right? For the majority of human history, to even hear music, you had to hear it from people who knew how to play it, or you yourself had to know how to play it, right? There was never an option for people who did not know how to play music to just hear it, right? They had to either know people who played music, or they'd have to go to some kind of show or some kind of celebration in which music was being played, right? So, but despite that, music still has the same purpose that we have it for now. So, for instance, in this day and age, one of the things which I already tapped on with the example of what Extentacion was saying, and the biblical example of David lifting the spirit off of Saul when he played the lyre, right? One of the main purposes is mood regulation, right? Like, I think everybody has songs that cheer them up. There's songs that people like to listen to, or types of music people listen to maybe when they're angry, to calm themselves down, right? Me particularly, I kind of more so listen to music to match my mood or mode. I'm not one of those people that like, because there's certain people who don't even like to listen to music that's sad, because like it'll make them sadder. Whereas like I'm the kind of person that if I'm sad, I'll listen to something that's sad and it'll cheer me up, right? And like, for instance, people who like to work out, right? Like there's certain people who, when they're gonna go for a workout, they want like something aggressive, right? So they'll listen to maybe like some trap music or drill music, right? Some real aggressive hardcore hip hop, right? There's somebody I knew that when he would work out, he preferred to listen to R&B music, because like, he associated his fitness journey with women finding him attractive, and trying to please women. So that's the connection he would have with that, right? But no matter what, there's this It can be for mood regulation. It can be for, expression. 'Cause like how I said, I prefer to listen to music that matches my mood, right? Or then you have focus and motivation, right? Uh, Another reason would be nostalgia. I think, particularly anybody who was born in, I guess you could say since the time of recorded music, but particularly say people born before the early 2000s, right? We have songs that remind us of when we were kids, remind us of our teenage years and all that kind of stuff. And I'm pretty sure it's the same thing for people who are born in like 2010 and stuff, but it's a bit different because music was released differently and there was more of a monolithic culture to music from the time. And it's very interesting because it's kind of like boxed in this weird area, right, where we had like a all together culture in regards to music and who the popular artists are and all that kind of stuff, whereas right now it's a lot more scattered all over the place, where you have artists who are like super super famous, but like only their fan base knows their music, right? That wasn't a thing before. If somebody was super super famous, you knew like whatever their hit song was, right? But now on the flip side, it's a bit different because with these artists who are like famous now, their fans know their entire catalog. Whereas like back in the days, you'd have guys who are super super famous, and while their fans knew their entire catalog and stuff like that, everybody still knew them. Like it was different, right? And before we got to the time period of recording music, since recorded music was not so much a thing and people didn't have access to just like listening to an album, like you didn't have people in let's say old England back in the 1800s, like Victorian England. People there couldn't hear what Chinese music sounded like, right? Only people who lived in China can hear what Chinese music sounded like, right? So uh, before then, music, there wasn't this thing with like music or where we have our favorite artists and all that kind of stuff, right? But there was still the purpose of like mood regulation, emotional expression, focus and motivation. For instance, when like the Romans and old armies back in those days when they would go to war, and even in the medieval times, they would have musicians with them, right? To kind of like, or maybe certain soldiers who knew how to play instruments, they would play certain types of music to ready them for war, to ready them for battle, right? I think from what I remember, I could be wrong, but even in the Bible, when they were going to war, there was somebody who would play a horn or a type of instrument, right? So, regardless of how it comes, it still had that kind of purpose, right? But what I was getting at though, before I went off on like that whole tangent, was like using music for nostalgic reasons, right? And that's why I went to the whole example of like popular music and how it brings you back to times and how it connects you, right? And I guess as I already explained with war, there's social and group purposes, right? Like, for rituals and ceremonies, right? Weddings, funerals, church proceedings, and stuff like that, sporting events, right? So, the main thing that probably could be argued as the reason or the purpose of music is its ability to shift things within the human soul. Like as I said, whether it be mood, focus, motivation, like uh, energy, right? And music is powerful, right? And it's clear with all the examples that I just gave. There's brain effects to it. There's ways that affects your mind, right? Like dopamine hits, oxytocin, the neurons in your brain, right? I'm not a neuroscientist, so I don't know. I know bits about that kind of stuff, not all, but basically there is science behind why and how music feels so powerful to people, right? And a big part of it, like when you think about the difference between a bad song and a good song, right? And when I say bad, I don't mean like a mediocre song. I mean like bad, like turn this off kind of bad, right? And of course, that's subjective, right? But basically, the arrangement and the rhythms hit you in a certain way, right? And almost similar to food, right? Because different people like different kinds of food. But if you have the stomach for it, the music is going to hit you a certain way, right? Somebody singing hits you a certain way, right? So the in regards to the purpose of music, and I think I've just more so gone over the effects, but I think it's something to be thought about in regards to when you're selecting music to listen to. I think it's something to think about in regards to, what kind of music I and other musicians are going to make, right? Because music tends to follow context, right? In the context of what's going on around, or what's culturally important, or what's, like, for instance, in the example that I gave of like how they would use it for war when a army came back to their country successful after a battle, or successful after a war, right? I'm pretty sure they weren't playing sad and depressing music, right? Like the kind of music that they would play during a ceremony when they're burying the fallen soldiers wouldn't be the same music that they're playing at the celebratory the celebration of the victory in battle, right? So that's the thing I think in regards to music and its purpose that we need to consider and think about, right? And especially in this day and age where we have this world that's getting more and more blended and more smashed together and more gentrified and combined, right? And mixed, right? That the music is a powerful thing, and that it needs to be used a particular way. And I don't think at this point in time we're using it in the best way, right? And or at least we're not absorbing it in the best way, because I think if people understood the purpose of music, and because I think we're at a point where, just thanks to the whole culture of popular music and recorded music, that we're kind of at this point where we just take it for entertainment, since music can be so cheaply produced and so easily made now. And there's so much, like, people are concerned about AI slop, right? Slop is already been around, but I guess human slop is better to people, right? But that's the reason, part of the reasons why, because there's a perception that music has gotten worse. But that's one of the main things as to why that is the case, because it's so available, and also it's so easy to be made, right? And now with AI, you can make music even quicker now, right? But basically, uh, there needs to be consideration in regards to that, right? Because I think the only purpose a lot of people, and this is kind of why this question triggered me and why I wanted to talk about this, right? Because I think we only think about music from a standpoint of entertainment at this point in time, right? And I think people need to start to take it a bit more seriously. Not saying you can't have fun and you can't have music that you enjoy. Like me, I love me some Waka Flocka. I love listening to some Waka Flocka, Chief Keef, NBA YoungBoy, right? Like even some songs, a little bit of Lil Uzi Vert, right? Like Lil Wayne is one of my favorite rappers, right? I like music that's like fun, but I also like listening to like rock music. Like I like songs from Soundgarden. I like songs from Blink 182, Coldplay, right? So, but basically, what I'm getting at is the people who complain about music being in a bad state, right? Particularly people who don't make music, like people who are just more so casual listeners, right? I think they need to understand the purpose of music and understand that if, like, from a perspective of how the music's affecting them, because as I was talking about, like, the brain effects and everything, right? You need to be more selective with the music you're listening to, right? Like almost treat music in a fashion how people treat like X-rated movies, right? Where people have like some stuff they will watch, some stuff they won't watch, or what they just straight up won't watch. Even X-rated regular films, right? Me, I'm a person, I do not watch horror movies. That is not my thing. I don't like seeing people getting chopped up, stabbed up. There's certain horror movies, like, right, that I've liked, right? But I don't like try to watch them every week. And there's certain people who are horror movie junkies, right? The same way how we're intentional with the movies that we watch and what we're letting into our minds in regards to movies, right? Because there are certain people who don't like horror movies because they don't want to see that stuff popping up in their dreams and all that kind of stuff, right? But the same way how we're intentional with that, I think people need to start being intentional like that with music, right? And that's not to say you can enjoy some fun music, right? Play your Chief Keef, play your NBA YoungBoy, right? Sure, right? But I think if people want music to get to a better state, especially in this day and age where we have this thing called an algorithm, right? You need to start looking for and start trying to observe music that's more purposeful, right? Now, but on the end, that's only halfway. the fault of people who, or halfway the responsibility of people who are music listeners who don't make music. On the other end, people who make music, I think, have the responsibility to try and make music that's more fulfilling, right? Now, and that could get a little tricky in this like day and age where you have like all the biggest artists kind of have their lane and their thing that they do. Like every artist can't be how XXX Tentacion was, because he made all kinds of different music. He made rock music. He made trap music, right, or trap sounding music. Let me say, not explicitly trap music. And he made R&B music that was like straight up R&B music. He has songs like those. Like it's a whole mixed bag that he came with, right? And it's probably part of, and he did each style that he did well. It was a thing because there's certain artists who like they're very very good at rapping, but when they try to do rock music, it was just very, it was diarrhea when they tried to do some rock music. But with him, that wasn't the case, right? Any style he touched, he did it well, right? So, but basically what I'm getting at is that it is the responsibility of music creators and music makers to make music more purposeful. But as I mentioned here, music does follow context, right? Because the whole reason why music started turning to this thing where we just take it for entertainment and party music and all that kind of stuff is, well, because it fit the context, right? Life was more about party, right? Because as some may be aware, right? Kendrick Lamar made a song called "Watch the Party Died," where he was explaining like this kind of stuff, right? So, but basically, I think whether we like it or not, I think there is going to be that kind of change and that kind of shift where music is going to get more quote unquote purposeful, right? But if we're going in line with everything I already discussed here, right? It's not so much that music is going to become more purposeful, music is just going to serve its purpose, which is to match the context of our life as we move to the beat of our own drum.